Hello and welcome. Tonight, we step into a world where warmth rose not just from hearths, but from deep, echoing chambers of stone and water. A world where steam softened the air and voices floated gently through vaulted ceilings. Tonight, we slip into the ancient Roman baths, not simply as a place to wash, but as a sanctuary of ritual, restoration, and quiet connection. If the lights are still on, let them soften. Let your body settle. Let your thoughts slow. The day has already begun to dissolve. Outside, the Roman dusk stretches over rooftops of terracotta, casting long shadows across crumbling columns and quiet fountains. The chatter of markets fades to a whisper, and footsteps become fewer, more deliberate. Along the stone-paved streets, cloaks sway gently with the breeze, and sandals whisper against the worn earth. Ahead stands the Thermae ground, familiar and inviting, a place where the threshold does not separate, but welcomes. As you approach, scented oils of thyme and myrrh drift toward you, carried on the steam that rises steadily into the cooling air. Inside, the world narrows to warmth and breath. Marble columns gleam beneath a soft glow. Light filters in through high windows, illuminating wisps of mist and the slow dance of rising droplets. The baths were never only about cleansing, they were about presence, about the daily ritual of coming home to oneself, in silence, in heat, in water. Within these walls, strangers nodded without need for words. Friends shared the comfort of stillness. And healers, midwives, poets and merchants alike found, for a brief hour, the space to be weightless. Everything here moved in gentle succession. Cool waters led to warmth. Silence led to speech. Fingers traced the smoothness of warm travertine stone. Beeswax candles flickered beside the pools, their scent mingling with pine resin and olive oil. In the chapters to come, we'll wander, not quickly but carefully, through these halls. We'll follow the water, listen for echoes, and settle into the stillness that lives between breath and steam. So now, step quietly with me, into the hush of ancient water, the breath of warm stone, and the gentle mystery of the Roman bath. A place that, as you'll see, was never just a bath, at all. It begins with a threshold, not a door, not a gate, but a passage. Stone underfoot, smoothed by centuries, the air shifts even before the entrance is crossed. Outside, the sun may blaze or the wind may sweep dust across the forum, but here, within these thick walls, the world changes. There is quiet. There is shadow. There is breath. Roman baths were not haphazard collections of pools and rooms. They were designed thoughtfully, rhythmically, like a hymn sung in stone. As you step inside, the light itself seems different. It does not glare or startle. It falls gently through high, narrow windows, diffused by layers of mist. Soft rectangles of sunlight move slowly across the floor, interrupted only by the occasional sway of a robe or the shimmer of rising steam. The floor is warm beneath bare feet, not burning, just gently heated. Part of the Hopocauste system, an underfloor miracle of Roman engineering. You may not see the fires that feed it, but their warmth is everywhere. In the walls, in the benches, in the air that hums softly around your skin. The Fuges Furdum comes first, a cool space, quiet and still, where marble benches line the walls. The cold pool gleams like a mirror. Touch the surface, and the chill climbs your arm like a whispered warning, but this is not a place of shock. It is a place of preparation, a moment to gather oneself, to listen, to leave the dust and chatter of the outside world behind. Further in lies the tepidarium, the warm room. Its breath is gentle, comforting. The walls are often curved, the ceilings high, arching, like the belly of a great stone whale. Here time slows. Conversations happen in murmurs or not at all. The sound of dripping water echoes faintly, rhythmic and soft. On either side, niches hold basins of scented water or oil, flickering with reflected light. You pass from cool to warm almost without noticing. The transition is that smooth. Then, at last, the Coldarium, the hot room. Here the air is dense, thick with steam. It clings to your skin, settles into your hair, softens the muscles in your shoulders without needing to be asked. The heat is not aggressive, it enfolds. A pool at the center, deeper and darker than the rest, seems to breathe, exhaling warmth, inhaling silence, and around its edges, bathers recline on marble slabs. Some sit with closed eyes, beads of sweat tracing lines down their temples. Others lean forward, letting water slip between their fingers, or press warm cloths to their necks. There is no rush, no obligation, only heat and stillness, and the slow untangling of the body's knots. The materials themselves carry memory: travertine, limestone, brick, tile, each chosen not just for strength, but for sensation. When you run your hand across the wall, it doesn't startle, it welcomes. The stones are warm to the touch, sometimes slick with condensation, sometimes dry and powder soft. The scent is layered: olive oil, cedar wood, beeswax, old smoke. The scent that tells you this place has existed longer than memory. Aside, the city bustles. Orders are shouted in the market, wheels creak against cobblestones, and birds wheel over rooftops. But none of that touches here. In the bath, the senses narrow. Vision adjusts to dimness. Hearing tunes itself to water. Skin learns to notice again. Heat, humidity, breath. These structures were more than functional. They were spiritual in their design. The vaults above your head, some domed, some coffered, guide sound and echo softly. Even footsteps seem respectful here. Mosaics underfoot often depict sea creatures or geometric spirals, reminders of nature's rhythm. Walls may bear painted scenes, Venus rising from the waves, dolphins with pitchers of water, not sacred in the way temples were, but not mundane either. This was the sacred of the everyday, the divine held in heed and architecture. And as you walk through, slowly, quietly, you begin to feel it. The weight of the world doesn't disappear, but it softens. Your shoulders lift, your breathing deepens, and with each step, the outer world recedes further. Some Romans came to the baths to cleanse, others to socialize, some sought healing, others simply came because it was the rhythm of the day. But all of them, knowingly or not, stepped into something more, into a space shaped not just by stone, but by intention, a space where heat, water, and light worked together to remind the body what it felt like to belong to itself. This was no ordinary building. It was a choreography of temperature and silence, a sanctuary of design and sensation. And as we settle here, in the warmth of the tepidarium, with the ceiling high above and the air thick with thyme and cedar, we begin to understand. A Roman bath was never just a bath. The Roman bath was not a private retreat. It was a gathering, a slow, daily unfolding of bodies and voices, footsteps and glances. There was no need to announce your arrival. The bath welcomed all who entered, from dusty merchants and weary travellers to elegant matrons and eager apprentices. It asked only that you leave your sandals and urgency at the door. There were no clocks. Time moved differently here. It flowed with the water, curled in steam, and drifted on quiet conversation. People came and went, not according to schedule, but according to rhythm. And in that shared rhythm, something gentle began to happen, not just to the muscles and skin, but to the space between people. It softened. You might see a senator and a shopkeeper in the same tepidarium, their robes laid beside each other like old friends. You might overhear a teacher explaining poetry to a student, their words punctuated by the soft splash of water into a basin. Or a pair of mothers exchanging news over the sleepy murmur of children dozing on warm benches. Each bath was a cross-section of the city, rich and poor, old and young, foreigners and citizens, all porous now, like skin warmed by mist. Women and men bathed separately, though in some smaller towns or private estates the rules were looser. In cities like Rome and Pompeii, hours might be divided, the morning for men, the afternoon for women. But the experience was shared in spirit. It was not about the body on display, it was about the body at ease. Robes slipped off without shame, scars were visible, joints ached openly, no one needed to pretend they were not human. That was the point. Attendants moved through the halls, silent and efficient. They carried clean linens and bowls of oil, scrapers for removing sweat and dust, cups of cool water. Some were slaves, others hired help. They did not interrupt the stillness, they worked within it, part of the choreography. Their steps were light, practiced, their presence steady and non-invasive, like the warmth from the walls. People talked, yes, but not loudly. Voices were shaped by the stone. In the bathhouse, even laughter curved softly. Jokes were shared in low tones, hands gesturing lazily through the steam. Secrets, too, were whispered here. Things too delicate for the clamour of markets or the formality of forums. Confessions floated between columns. Plans were born in corners lined with marble. Friendships deepened over the slow ritual of oiling limbs and rinsing away the day. But silence had its place as well. Sometimes the room would settle into a shared hush, not because anyone asked, but because the water invited it. You could sit beside someone for an hour, neither of you speaking, and feel more connected than after a long conversation. The bath made room for that kind of quiet. A quiet that healed. For children, the bathhouse was both playground and school. They learned to float in the cooler pools. They listened to elders tell stories while combing oil through thinning hair. They watched their mothers and fathers navigate the gentle dance of community. When to speak, when to bow slightly, when to simply listen. It was not written in law, it was passed in gesture and tone, like steam passed from room to room. There were rules, of course, not posted, but understood. Don't speak too loudly, don't stare, don't rush. Keep the peace of the space intact. Let your presence be part of the warmth, not a disturbance. If a bather needed space, they would draw their robe a little closer or shift away slightly on the bench. If someone looked faint in the coldarium, you offered water or led them gently to the frigidarium to cool. It was a kindness performed without spectacle. The bathhouse was also a place of repair. Not just physical, though aching backs and sore knees were soothed here, but emotional as well. Arguments from the street faded here. The hum of voices, the warmth of the air, the presence of others in stillness, it made anger feel too heavy to carry. Even the most stubborn tempers tended to dissolve after half an hour in steam. For the elderly, the bath was memory. They walked the halls not just to stretch stiff limbs, but to revisit years gone by. They would settle into the same corners they had used in youth, recall old conversations by the feel of the stone against their palms. The warmth coaxed stories from them. Tales of childhood winters, long-closed shops, festivals that glittered under torchlight. And younger bathers would listen, not out of duty, but because in that space all voices felt important. Occasionally, entertainers would drift through, a boy juggling polished stones, a woman with a reed flute. But the performances were brief, quiet, and respectful. Nothing here was meant to jar or jolt. Even beauty was softened. The murals on the walls, the mosaics underfoot, they weren't garish. They were steady, repetitive patterns, flowing sea creatures, gentle gods, scenes that invited contemplation, not interruption. There was something democratic about the whole experience, not in a political sense, but in a bodily one. Everyone, stripped of tunic and title, became equal in the mist. No amount of coin could buy silence. No toga could shield from sweat. In the bathhouse, your name mattered less than your presence, whether it added calm to the room or stirred the waters. At the center of it all was not luxury, but rhythm, a social choreography shaped by stone, heat, and habit. No one directed it. No sign told you when to move to the next room. You listened to your body. You watched others. You followed the tide of relaxation like a leaf on a stream. And as you left, slowly, with hair damp and skin softened, you stepped back into the world carrying more than clean limbs. You carried the memory of quiet voices, the scent of time, the echo of laughter folded into marble, the knowledge that for an hour you had belonged to something ancient and kind. Because in Rome, a bath was never just about water. It was about people, and about what it meant to be fully human in the company of others, without masks or armor. A shared space, where the simple act of being warm together was enough. Before the splash of water, before the heat of the steam settled into your bones, there was another ritual, one older than Rome itself. It began with oil, not a hurried rub or perfunctory dab, but a slow, deliberate anointing, a practice that touched more than skin. In Roman baths, cleansing was not only about water, it was about contact, warmth, and rhythm. And the tools of this ritual were as essential as the water itself. You would start with unguents, smooth scented oils that came in small flasks of clay, glass, or carved bone. Olive oil was most common, sometimes infused with herbs or crushed flowers. For those who could afford more, there were exotic oils imported from Egypt or the East. Hints of cinnamon, thyme, cedar, or spikenard. You would warm the oil in your palms. Legs, shoulders never rushed. The scent would rise as the heat of your body met the perfume of the earth. Your skin would drink it in slowly, and so would your senses. After oil came the strigil, a tool curved like a crescent moon, made of bronze or iron, smooth to the touch but firm. It was held in the hand like a trusted companion, not too tightly, never pressed harshly. The strigil was used to scrape away the oil, along with sweat and dust, dead skin and fatigue. With each long gliding motion, the day peeled away. It was not painful. Some bathers scraped themselves. Others, especially the wealthy or the elderly, would lie down on benches and let attendants perform the act for them. It was not servitude, it was care. The attendant would move slowly, reading the muscles beneath the skin, listening to breath. The motion was quiet, almost meditative. One long stroke down the calf, another across the back. The sound was faint, a soft whisper of bronze against oiled flesh. Straddles were cleaned after each use, dipped into water, wiped with linen, set aside to cool. Some bore inscriptions or small gods carved into their handles. They were not tools of status, but of intimacy, passed from hand to hand, shared between brothers, borrowed by friends. They were made to fit in the palm like something familiar, something ancient. Beside the strigil there might be a small bowl or patera to catch the used oil. The residue was sometimes discarded, sometimes collected for other uses, as polish for leather or for rubbing onto tired animals. Nothing was wasted. Even the dirt carried stories. There were also sponges, soft and porous, cut from sea creatures and soaked in water. These were used to rinse the body after scraping or to cool the skin in the hotter rooms. A gentle squeeze across the back, a few drops on the neck. In the quiet of the bath, even these gestures felt sacred. You did not need speech to know when to offer a sponge or where to place the cloth. Eyes and breath were enough. For some, the cleansing ritual was as much spiritual as physical. Athletes believed it prepared the body for competition. Priests performed it before sacrifice. Women used it before childbirth. It was a gesture of respect for the body, for the gods, for the day ahead. Even soldiers on campaign might fashion a crude strigil and flask, using oil and river water, replicating the peace of the baths wherever they could. The room where this cleansing took place, the apodyterium, was not ornate. It was functional. Stone benches, cubby holes for sandals and robes, a tiled floor that stayed cool beneath bare feet. But in its simplicity was order. You undressed there, and in doing so you stepped out of the world, not just out of your clothes, but out of your titles, burdens, and noise. And when the cleansing was done, you felt different, not cleaner exactly, though that too, but unburdened, like you had been reminded of something gentle, something solid and alive beneath all the dust of your errands and expectations. In literature, poets compared the act of oiling the body to tending a flame. They said the skin gleamed like bronze under torchlight, like a statue brought to life. And in some ways it was true. The bath made statues of us all, not stiff or cold, but still luminous, sculpted by steam and care. Children were taught early how to oil themselves, how to hold the strigil, how to move without rush, not because it was vanity, but because it was belonging. It was the ritual that stitched each person into the fabric of Rome. Rich or poor, soldier or scribe, you knew the steps. Even those too frail to oil themselves would come, sit near the benches, and inhale the warmth. They would watch others, their hands, their care, their ease, and remember when they too had moved with such confidence. That memory, too, was cleansing. The tools were simple, a flask, a blade, a cloth, but in their simplicity was something lasting, the same way a lullaby needs only voice, or a prayer needs only silence. And when the last drops of oil had been scraped away, when the strigil had been cleaned, and the cloth laid aside, you did not feel exposed, you felt gathered, as if your body had been reclaimed, as if in the act of touch, even if only your own hand, you had returned to yourself. Because in a Roman bath, to cleanse was to remember that your body was not a machine. It was a vessel, one that deserved warmth, and touch, and rest. And so you rose, slowly, skin tingling and fragrant, and stepped forward, not into heat just yet, but into stillness, into a new room, into the next chapter of the ritual. You walk forward slowly, feet bare against worn stone. The path from the anointing bench to the heated rooms is dimly lit, not dark, but gently muted. Light from small bronze lamps flickers across damp walls, and the warmth ahead greets you like a breath held long and now finally exhaled. You've left behind the scraping and the oil. Now you enter the domain of breath and sweat, of heat that seeps into joints and memories alike. First is the tapidarium, the warm room. It does not strike you with heat, but welcomes you gently, a place of transition. The air here is mild, soft with moisture. The ceiling curves above like the inside of a seashell. Steam gathers along the smooth surface. Pillars stand like quiet sentinels in the mist. You sit or lie on a bench of warm stone, the heat humming through it from beneath. Hokos, clay pillars hidden underfoot, carry warmth like silent ghosts. Your skin, still scented with oil, begins to respond. Pores open, muscles uncoil. It is here that breath finds its rhythm. Inhale, exhale, nothing sharp, just presence. Around you others sit in silence or speak in hushed tones. Their words drift like vapor, never loud, never lingering. You may close your eyes. You may listen to the soft trickle of water from a fountain tucked in a corner. It is the sound of slowness. When you are ready, not rushed, only drawn forward by the promise of deeper heat, you step into the caldarium, the hot room. It greets you not with brightness, but with weight. The air is dense, rich with steam and salt and breath. The warmth here is not a surface thing, it is total. The kind that presses into your bones, that speaks in quiet pulses to your blood. Stone benches line the walls. The floor, warm beneath your soles, is slick in places, always shifting with condensation. The heat wraps you in silence. This is not a room for talking. This is where everything is drawn out. Not just sweat, but worry. Not just aches, but time. You sit, you let it come. The steam coats your skin, droplets form at your temples. Each breath feels like it carries something away from you. There is a labyrinth, a basin of cool water, sometimes in the center, sometimes off to the side. You dip your hand in. The contrast is electric, but not jarring. It reminds you of where the edges of your body are, of how alive it still is beneath the heat. Some bathers pour ladles of this cool water over their heads, others simply get. And when you feel the body has taken all the heat it needs, when your breath has slowed into something like a lullaby, you rise, slowly, carefully, not to leave, but to return, to the frigidarium, the cool room. A return not to chill, but to clarity. The air is cooler here, yes, but it does not bite. It soothes. It clears. It reminds you of the outside world in the gentlest way. The frigidarium often contains a pool. Cold, still, waiting. The surface may reflect the ceiling, often flat, sometimes coffered, a mirror of marble and water. You may not plunge immediately. First you sit on the stone bench beside it. Let your body adjust. Let your breath remember itself. And when you do step into the water, the sensation is clean, astringent. It draws the heat from you like a second strigil. Your skin tightens. Your heart stirs. It is not shocking, but honest. Your muscles, softened by heat, respond with surprise, not fear, just awakening. In this water you float for a moment, or you sit against the wall, submerged to the shoulders. Around you others may do the same, or they may whisper, or laugh softly. There is no fixed rule, only a rhythm, and you find it, or it finds you. The transition between the three rooms, warm, hot and cool, is not a sequence, it is a tide. Some move back and forth between them, others stay long in one, short in another. The bath does not command, it invites. What the Romans knew, what we sometimes forget, is that the body holds more than function, it holds memory. And memory, like oil, must sometimes be warmed before it can be released. The heat loosens it, the cold clarifies it. And somewhere between the two, between stone and steam, between benches and breath, you find a middle place. It is here, in this quiet passage from heat to cool, that the bath ceases to be a building. It becomes something internal. A sanctuary shaped not by marble or mortar, but by your own stillness. And when you rise from the frigidarium, when droplets trace your skin like silver lines, when you gather your towel and step into the corridor beyond, you do not leave the bath. You carry it in your skin, in your breath. In the silence you now hear more clearly, because a Roman bath was never just a sequence of rooms. It was a journey, not across space, but across states of being, a journey of touch, of heat, of breath, and of return. If the coldorium was a place for solitude and sweat, and the frigidarium a place for clarity and breath, there was yet another chamber woven invisibly between them, not marked by marble or heat, but by laughter, glances, and words carried on steam. A chamber made not of stone, but of people. The Roman bath was a sanctuary of the body, yes, but it was also the stage upon which society performed its gentlest rituals of recognition. When you entered the baths, you left your toga behind, your title, your work. You left behind your ledger and your sword. And in their place, you stepped into something quieter, older, the simple recognition that all bodies at the end of a long day wish to be at ease. It is late afternoon now. The light outside is turning to honey. Within the walls of the thermae, the sounds shift. Here, senators and scribes, poets and perfume sellers, old men and apprentices, all gather in the same air. They pass each other ladles of water. They offer olive oil from shared flasks. They greet each other not with deference, but with familiarity. Salve Lucius, how's the ankle? Still stiff in the cold, but better after the caldarium. The bath is not formal, it is not hushed. It breathes, with the sound of belonging. In the Palaestra, the courtyard just beyond the main bathing rooms, some still wrestle, not with force, but with pleasure, the way boys do when they are no longer boys. They toss small weights, flex arms, grin. Nearby, a pair of older men play at Latrunculi, the Roman board game of strategy and movement, flat stones clicking gently onto marble squares. They do not speak much. Their game speaks for them. And then there is the gossip. It does not shout. It does not whisper. It meanders, like warm water through a tiled drain. Did you hear what happened at the Forum? He's been seen twice this week with the banker's daughter. They say the governor's letter was forged. No judgments, just drift. In the bath, information is passed not like a scroll, rolled and sealed, but like steam, fleeting, fragrant, and ever-present. Even the structure of the bath encourages this. Benches curved gently into semicircles, niches designed not for privacy but proximity, pools with ledges just wide enough for two to sit side by side, shoulders barely apart, breath shared without effort. The bath guides bodies toward each other, not away. It teaches that connection happens not in speeches, but in silence broken by warmth. Some meet friends here every day at the same hour, beneath the same painted ceiling. They do not arrange it, they simply come. And if one does not arrive, the absence is felt, like a cool patch on the otherwise warm stone. He was not here yesterday, someone says. Perhaps his sister gave birth, or perhaps nothing. Perhaps he simply walked a different path that day. But still he is noticed. In the women's section, separated, quieter, and slightly smaller, the air holds a different rhythm. Not lesser, just more contained. Women gather with friends, mothers with daughters, midwives with linen bundles. Their voices lift occasionally into laughter or fall into murmured prayers. They scrub each other's backs with sponges, braid damp hair, exchange herbal poultices for skin, for sleep, for scent. News is shared here too, births and betrothals, dreams and aches. Outside, near the colonnade where cool air flows in from the garden, vendors sell honeyed dates and salted nuts, not loudly, just present. A young boy carries a basket of figs, his bare feet soft against the paving stones. He does not call out. He simply appears, waits, and wanders on. Some conversations go nowhere. They are not meant to. The mosaic in the new bathhouse, one man says. Too many birds, no balance. Another nods. But the water is warmer. That matters more. They fall into silence. It is enough. In the bath, the value of words is not their sharpness, but their softness, their ability to wrap around you like a linen towel, light and familiar. Occasionally, someone sings, not loudly, just a phrase, a line from a poem, a melody remembered from youth. The sound echoes, catches, in the curve of the ceiling, and disappears before it becomes performance. No one claps, but someone may hum along. Children sometimes run through wrapped in small cloths, chased by a parent or older sibling. Their laughter is not scalded. It mingles with the splash of water, the rise of steam, the gentle slap of sandals on damp stone. They remind everyone, even the elder statesmen and wary generals, that and then there are those who say little at all. They come every day, they bathe, they sit, they nod at familiar faces, and they leave. They do not linger in conversation, but their presence, constant and quiet, becomes a kind of language too, a rhythm of arrival and departure, a ritual without words. As twilight nears, the bath begins to empty. The steam lingers longer in the cooling air, robes are gathered, sandals found, hair wrapped in dry cloth, and as each person steps into the evening, The marketplace dimmer now, the lanterns being lit, they carry with them more than clean skin. They carry the memory of shared space, of murmurs and glances, of steam and silence and soft laughter that asked nothing in return. Because a Roman bath was not just a place for water, it was a place for presence, a place to be seen but not judged, to speak but not shout, to listen but not necessarily reply. And in a world of noise and structure, war and politics, the bath offered something ancient and intimate, the quiet certainty that sometimes to sit beside another human being in warmth and without hurry is enough. The Romans did not divide the world cleanly between the sacred and the ordinary. To them the divine was not confined to temples, nor restricted to incense and priestly rites. It flickered quietly in daily rituals, in the lighting of a household lamp, in the murmur of a prayer over bread, and in the gentle lowering of a body into warm water. Within the bathhouse this truth was especially felt, for while it bustled with talk and laughter, while it echoed with footsteps and the splash of water, beneath that noise there was something else, something quieter, a reverence not always spoken aloud, but carried in gesture and rhythm. To bathe, for many Romans, was more than hygiene. It was a form of renewal, not only of the body, but of the spirit. One did not simply enter the baths as they were, one prepared, first in the mind, then in the flesh. Before crossing the threshold of the Thermae, some paused at small shrines tucked discreetly into corners near the entrance. They were not grand, a carved stone, a flickering oil lamp, an offering of flowers or a pinch of grain. But they were there, devoted to local spirits, to the Lares and Penates, guardians of place and hearth, or to deities more broadly tied to health and healing. Asclepius, the god of medicine, sometimes received a whispered thanks, Salus, goddess of well-being, Fortuna, for her ever-changing hand, and occasionally Minerva, for the clarity that came after cleansing. Inside the baths one might see gestures that looked like habits, but were closer to prayer. A man dipping his hand into water, touching forehead and heart, a woman unrolling her towel slowly, as if in offering, a child crossing the threshold of the tepidarium with eyes closed, lips moving, perhaps reciting a rhyme passed down from a grandmother who said it would guard against chills. The physical act of bathing had a rhythm to it, one that echoed the Roman appreciation for order and structure. Warm, then hot, then cold, movement followed by stillness, scraping, rinsing, resting. Each part of the process had its place, and within that rhythm the body became more than flesh, it became a vessel, emptied of weariness, filled with silence. Some even believed the bath could cleanse misfortune, not just dirt, not just sweat, but heaviness of spirit, bad dreams, sickness of the heart. They spoke of water that could carry away sorrow, of steam that could loosen grief held tight in the chest. These weren't grand beliefs, etched into temple walls, just quiet ones, repeated gently among families. Wash your sadness in warm water, a mother might say. Leave your worries in the basin. Occasionally, ceremonies unfolded within the Thermae, small ones, unannounced. A soldier returning from campaign might be welcomed not just with wine and bread, but with an oil massage in the caldarium, performed by a friend who spoke little and listened well. A widow in mourning might sit in the laconicum, wrapped in a damp cloth, as her friends anointed her shoulders with spiced oil, and sang a song too old to remember its origin. In private baths attached to villas, the tone was even more hushed. There, in stone chambers lit by flickering lamps, rituals took on a deeper, more personal feel. One might light incense before entering, or leave a sprig of rosemary for remembrance. Near the bath's edge, there are records of amulets being worn into the water, of whispered chants to ward off bad luck, of bath oils infused with herbs tied to Venus for love, or to Mars for courage. And for those who were ill, the bath became almost sacred. The healing waters were not just hot, they were believed to draw out imbalance. To sweat was to purge. To scrape the skin was to remove not only dust, but misalignment of humors. Physicians sometimes prescribed specific bathing regimens, but many simply came to sit, to breathe, to listen to the drip of condensation from vaulted ceilings, and feel the body slowly return to itself. In certain regions, baths were built near springs, considered divine. These waters were believed to rise from the earth with purpose, not only to clean but to bless. At places like Baiai or Aquae Sulis, pilgrims came not just to soak, but to pray. They left offerings in the water, coins, jewelry, tablets etched with requests. Let my child be healed. Let my husband return. Let the pain stop. These were not temple offerings, but bathhouse ones, whispered in steam, left in stone channels. There were also taboos, things not done. Some would not enter the bath on certain days. Others would never speak a dead person's name within its walls. There was a belief in some quarters that the steam might carry words further than intended, that the bath in its openness required care with speech. One might speak of dreams or ailments, but not of curses, not of omens, not of things best left outside. Among the older generations, a quiet ritual persisted, touching the water before speaking. It was subtle. A hand dipped, a fingertip flicked, but it marked a moment of grounding, as if to say, I am here, I am present, I have arrived within myself. Even the architecture played a part. The domes of the Caldarium, rising high above the stone pools, created acoustics that invited reverence. A whisper could be heard clearly across the room. A sigh echoed. And when someone, perhaps unintentionally, sang a single note, it lingered, hanging in the air like incense. The light, too, was sacred in its way. The bath was lit not by torches but by oil lamps, set into niches, suspended from bronze hooks. Their light flickered golden and soft, casting shadows that danced gently across marble. No harshness, just the kind of illumination that made the skin look ageless and the air feel tender. There are accounts of philosophers who bathed at dusk, believing that the transition from day to night, like the shift from warm to cold water, revealed truths that noon could not. They would sit in the tepidarium, eyes closed, and think not of politics or logic, but of time, of breath, of the self, not as a thinker, but as a being. And some believed dreams were born more clearly after a bath, that sleep, following immersion, was deeper, quieter, closer to the divine. There is mention of bathers who, upon drying and dressing, would sit in silence for a few minutes longer, not rushing back into the world, just waiting, as if something had been loosened inside them and needed stillness to settle. In this way, the Roman bath was not only communal, it was contemplative. It offered not only comfort but clarity, not only steam but stillness. The secular and the sacred flowed together, like warm water and oil, distinct yet impossible to separate. And though the emperors built temples with columns that reached for the gods, many of their people found the divine in the places where bodies met water, in the gentle scrape of a strigil, in the scent of thyme oil, in the hush that followed a deep exhale in the Caldarium. Because for the Romans, to cleanse the body was to honor it, and to honor the body with care, with quiet, with warmth, was to acknowledge something holy, not above them, but within. In the gentle rhythm of Roman life, there were few places where the barriers between classes dissolved so completely as in the baths. While the streets might echo with the clatter of status, senators in their bordered togas, merchants boasting their coin-laden tunics, slaves walking 2 paces behind, inside the thermae, all were brought back to the body, to the skin, to the warmth of water on the spine and the slow exhale of steam. It was a peculiar kind of democracy, not political, not legal, but sensorial. Everyone, from wealthy landowners to freedmen and humble labourers, passed through the same sequence of rooms. The frigidarium's brisk chill, the tepidarium's embracing warmth, the caldarium's heavy heat. They sweated side by side, sat on the same benches, sometimes shared oils if a friend or stranger offered a little extra. And yet, access did not mean equality. The grandest baths, like the baths of Caracalla or Diocletian, offered splendour that few could recreate at home. Vast halls with marble pillars, mosaic floors depicting sea creatures and gods, pools large enough to echo, their water gently stirred by moving bodies and sunlight filtered through high-set windows. Wealthier Romans might arrive with servants, one to carry towels, another to watch their belongings. They could afford the finest unguents, the richest oils scented with cinnamon or rose. Their sandals, removed at the threshold, would be collected and cleaned. After bathing, they might recline in the library within the complex, or enjoy a quiet meal from the on-site kitchens. But these luxuries, while notable, were not required. For a modest fee, sometimes paid in coin, sometimes covered by a patron or a local magistrate seeking goodwill, any citizen could bathe. Some baths offered different hours for men and women. Others had separate wings, and though decorum was maintained, there was often a relaxed familiarity, especially among regulars, who bathed at the same hour each day. For the working class, the baths were not only about cleanliness, they were a pause, a reprieve from noise and labour. The stoneworker whose arms ached from chiselling could sit in the steam and feel his muscles soften. The baker's apprentice, dusted with flour and ash, could scrub his skin until it shone. For a few moments, the body was not a tool. It was something to be soothed. Children, too, found their way into the baths. Though certain rooms were reserved for adults, the periphery often held quieter corners where families lingered. A mother rinsing her child's hair, a grandfather teaching a youngster how to use the strigil. The baths were not wild, but they were alive, filled with voices in various registers, the splash of water, the occasional peal of laughter. Vendors hovered near entrances selling combs, cloths, and fragrant oils. There were massage attendants, strigil bearers, and, in larger complexes, barbers who offered a quick trim before or after the soak. Some visitors came not to bathe at all, but to talk, to find friends, to hear the latest rumours, political news, a poet's scandal, a merchant's misfortune. These communal moments stretched across class lines. A freedman might sit beside a wealthy citizen and discuss chariot races. A washerwoman might share a knowing glance with the senator's wife, both sighing at the same weariness. In the haze of steam, social roles lost some of their rigidity, not entirely, but enough to allow a shared humanity to surface. Still, the bathhouses mirrored the city's rhythms. In the early morning they were quiet, populated by those who worked late or preferred solitude. Midday brought a hum of activity, with scholars and merchants drifting in between obligations, and as the sun tilted westward, the baths filled with the heartbeat of the city, men and women seeking release, cleansing, warmth. Even in remote towns, public baths stood as symbols of Roman order, a mark that Rome had arrived, had claimed, had civilized. Stone by stone, aqueduct by aqueduct, the empire extended its touch through water. Bathhouses, sometimes simple, sometimes grand, followed in its wake. In the provinces, customs blended. In Gaul, in Britannia, in North Africa, Roman bathing practices mingled with local traditions. The water might be hotter, the oils infused with different herbs, the architecture adapted to terrain, but the spirit remained, to gather, to soak, to breathe. For those who could not afford regular entry, there were still ways in. On festival days, many baths were free to all. Some cities passed laws mandating open access at set times. Wealthy citizens sometimes sponsored free bathing as a form of public generosity, a birthday gift to the people, or a political gesture. These days saw the baths swell with joy. Crowds gathered early, voices rose in song, and while the walls were perhaps more crowded, they pulsed with gratitude. In poorer quarters where public baths were scarce, simpler solutions emerged: communal washing areas, heated basins, shared pools. They lacked the grandeur of the great thermae, but not the spirit. The same rituals unfolded, albeit with more humility: a scraped back, a slow rinse, a moment of warmth before returning to hard days. Some families, unable to reach the public baths regularly, created mini rituals at home: a mother heating water over coals, a father washing the feet of his children. The act of cleansing, though smaller in scale, retained its meaning. For the enslaved, access to bathing varied. Some were permitted to join their masters or allowed designated hours. Others washed in private quarters. There are records of household slaves tending to each other, brushing backs, braiding hair, soothing bruises with warmed oil. In these moments, care bloomed quietly. Resistance too took root in such tenderness, reminding one another of dignity, of softness, of worth. The bathhouse also offered refuge. In times of grief, it became a place to cry unseen. The steam blurred tears, the ambient sound softened sobs, and because everyone entered with the body exposed, there was less room for pretense. You could sit beside someone who had lost everything and say nothing. Just share the silence, share the warmth. And for many, the baths were not merely a luxury, they were necessary. The city was dusty, the labor was grueling, homes were crowded, few possessed private facilities. Without public baths, the average Roman might go weeks without true cleanliness. In winter, the heated rooms offered one of the only public spaces of warmth. In summer, the cold plunge refreshed limbs weary from heat. Yet, even with their utility, the baths held something more: a social heart. A place where a person could feel part of something larger, to see familiar faces, to joke with strangers, to share the rhythm of rising and falling water. It grounded people, in their bodies, in their city, in one another. And when the bathers stepped back into the sunlight, hair damp, skin glowing, they carried that connection forward, into the market, into the home, into the endless motion of Roman life. Time, as it always does, moves gently forward, even through stone. The same travertine that once shimmered beneath the feet of Roman bathers began to dull with age. Water, once drawn in steady rhythm by well-tended aqueducts, slowed. Where once there was laughter and heat, now silence gathered in corners. Shadows stretched longer in the caldaria, and the echo of dripping water became more pronounced than the chatter of voices. The decline of the Roman baths was not sudden. It crept, like moss across a marble step, slow and quiet. For centuries they stood, these great palaces of cleanliness and community. Even as emperors came and went, as fortunes rose and fell, the baths endured. But the world around them began to shift. Rome's empire, stretched across continents, began to fray at the edges. Invasions, political upheaval, economic strain. They tugged gently, then urgently, at the threads holding society together. Maintaining a vast infrastructure like the public baths became more difficult. Aqueducts, once marvels of engineering, fell into disrepair. Heating systems dependent on wood and labor grew too costly. The great furnaces cooled. There were changes in values too. As Christianity spread through the empire, so did new ideas about modesty and the body. The communal nakedness of the bathhouse, once so ordinary, now seemed indecent to some. Voices began to call for restraint, for inward reflection, over public indulgence. The baths, once sacred in their own way, became suspect in another. Still, the baths did not vanish overnight. In some cities they continued to operate well into the twilight of the empire. A handful of artisans kept the chambers warm. A few faithful bathers returned, holding on to routines that had once felt eternal. But fewer came each year. The water was no longer always clean. The rooms no longer always lit. The silence between visitors grew longer. Some bathhouses were converted. A frigarium became a storeroom. A caldarium became a stable. In other places the buildings stood empty, slowly taken by ivy and wind. Birds nested in the clerestories. Dust settled where perfumes once lingered. But not all was lost. Even as the great structures faded, the memory of bathing remained. In monasteries and villas, the practice of ritual washing continued. More private, more spiritual, but still rooted in warmth and water. In the Islamic world, the tradition evolved into the hammam, echoing Roman rhythms with new layers of beauty and belief. In medieval towns, bathhouses would reappear, smaller, humbler, yet still built on ancient foundations. In language too, the baths left traces, words for soap, for steam, for the act of washing. Many still carry the weight of Rome. And in our modern spas, with their tiled walls and soft heat, something ancient lingers. The sense that to step into water is to shed not just dust, but worry. That warmth can be shared, that the body deserves tenderness. To walk today among the ruins of a Roman bathhouse is to hear echoes, not loud, not ghostly, just present, like the whisper of a fountain you can't quite see. A niche in the stone where a strigil once rested, the curved line of a pool that once held reflection, the feel of smooth tile beneath the fingertips. Perhaps the most powerful echo is not in the buildings but in us, in the desire to gather, to pause, to soak away the day, in the understanding that, for all the grand ideas of empire and conquest, it was here, in warmth and water, that Romans found something enduring, not power, not glory, but comfort. And so the bathhouse did not truly end. It softened, it dispersed. Its marble may be broken, its basins dry, but the spirit lives on. In hot springs, in shared showers after a long journey, in the way we lean back in a tub and let go. For in the end, the Roman bath was never just about the body. It was about presence, about being, about letting steam rise and breath slow and the world narrow to a single moment of calm. A quiet place, a shared warmth, a fading echo, still humming beneath the surface. The warmth has faded now, and the steam has thinned. The water lies still, quiet as glass, reflecting not faces, but memory. And as the last footsteps echo down the stone corridors of our journey, we leave behind more than marble and mosaic. We leave behind a feeling. Tonight we wandered through the ancient bathhouses of Rome, where stone walls once held voices and laughter, where flickering lamplight touched skin and warm waters cradled weary limbs. We stepped into the caldarium's heat and the frigidarium's hush. We listened to the rhythm of fountains and the soft scrape of oil on skin. We saw not only how Romans bathed, but how they lived, together in rhythm, in ritual. And as we followed their footsteps through scented air and sun-dappled courtyards, we saw something more. The care of the body was never separate from care of the spirit, that the bathhouse was not escape, but return, to stillness, to presence, to the simple truth of being held in warmth. Even as the empire fell, even as the buildings crumbled and silence returned to once crowded halls, the idea endured. The understanding that to gather in water, to breathe in steam and let go of the day is a kind of remembering, not just of Rome, but of ourselves. Perhaps somewhere in you, a corner of that echo lingers, a trace of warm marble underfoot, a breath softened by mist, a hush that asks nothing of you but to be still. For even now, In modern places far from Roman ruins, the spirit of the bath endures. In saunas, in spas, in quiet tubs lit by candlelight, and maybe, just maybe, as you lie back now beneath soft blankets, your body easing into the gentle pull of sleep, the waters remember you too. So rest. Let the warmth you imagined tonight follow you into dream. Let the sounds of trickling water and soft voices dissolve into silence. Let the story end not with a full stop, but with a breath. And if you found peace here, even for a moment, consider joining us again. Until next time, may your rest be deep, your dreams kind, and your sleep uninterrupted. Good night.